recovery. A couple of housekeeping items. You may have noticed that you cannot share your video and you are on mute as participants on this webinar, but you can interact with us through the Q&A or on the chat. If you want to ask any questions during the live discussion, please feel free to submit them, and Karen, who is one of the panelists on the webinar, will be moderating any questions and she'll let us know. This event's been really popular with lots of you asking questions on the Eventbrite registration form, so thank you. That's really helped us to shape our discussion today. We aim to untangle and clarify pages and pages of UK immigration policies, what that means for businesses and how businesses can best restructure for recovery, new working arrangements and investing in the UK. So there's a lot to cover today, and we've got a range of really cool panelists joining us to share their expertise. We're joined by our long-standing commercial partners, Kingston Smith and Smith Still Malters. Our business partners have years of working with our clients and are experts in the fields of immigration, restructuring and global mobility. I think yesterday when we did the dry run, they've been partners of ours for almost and over 10 years. So a lot of expertise there of working with our clients. So a little bit of background on London and Partners. London Partners is the trade, investment and promotion agency for London, and we work very closely with the Mayor of London office and our business partners to promote London as an attractive place to invest, a city to hold world-class cultural, sporting and business events, promote our London universities abroad, and also as a great and memorable place to visit. So we hope to see you in London very soon. I'm Lisa, I'm in the centre photo, and I'm an inward investment manager at London and Partners. So largely, I would be your first point of contact if you have decided to set up in London. I would be the first person you come into contact with, and I'd help you to navigate the London ecosystem to find opportunities and the best places to network and find connections. I'm joined by my colleagues Alex, who works for Research and Insights in London Partners, and Karen, who's lead for FBST, and they're going to quickly introduce themselves to you all. So Karen, would you like to kick off?
Great, thanks Lisa. Hi everyone. So I'm Karen Sandu, I work for London Partners and I lead the team in the financial business services and technology space, so helping international businesses from around the world as they look to set up in London.
Thank you.
And I'm Alex Waterman, and I'm a business insight manager here at London Partners. So I sit within the research and insights team with the main function of supporting actually Lisa and Karen's team, the foreign direct investment team, to provide insights to help sell London to our clients. Also help out on the assisting and support to the trade and growth team as well.
Thank you, Alex. I'd now like to invite our commercial partners to introduce themselves. Kingston Smith, Dan and Steve, would you like to introduce yourselves and a little bit more about Kingston Smith?
Yeah, hi, good morning everyone. I'm Steve Asher, Director of Global Mobility at Kingston Smith. We're a dynamic leading UK firm of accountants and business advisors. We've been helping clients thrive since 1923. With over 60 partners and more than 500 staff based in and around London. And we're also a leading member of the More Global network. More Global is an international family made up of over 30,000 people across more than 100 countries. Members are connected and collaborate to take care of our clients' needs at local, national and international level. We cover a wide range of sectors and services, including tax, audit and compliance, corporate finance, outsourcing, HR consultancy, restructuring and global mobility. We have a dedicated inward investment team covering North America, India, Europe, Latin America and China, and are very proud to be one of London and Partners' longest serving partners, supporting international companies to set up and expand in London.
Thank you. And Dan, would you like to introduce yourselves briefly? I know Steve's got a really good overview of Kingston Smith.
Yeah, no, so I'm Dan. I work in the MKS corporate finance team, where we help businesses with all aspects of their life cycle, whether it's fundraising to fund growth, buying businesses that are complementary to grow or to sell their businesses. We also help businesses list if they want to go onto the stock markets and things like that. I've been mainly working with businesses during the pandemic to help them get clarity quickly about their financial position and plan for the next 18 months in different scenarios and examine their options to bridge any gaps.
Thank you. We're very lucky to have you both on today, and the topics you'll be covering is very relevant to a lot of our international clients and clients who've set up in the UK recently. And then we've got Smith Stone Walters immigration firm, Rob Liu. Would you like to introduce yourself and the company?
Sure. Thank you, Lisa. Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Rob, and I work for a company called Smith Stone Walters. We are an immigration practice in London with global offices in India, China, and the US. I think we've been very lucky, and we've been part of the London Partners family for almost 10 years now. Throughout the years, we have been very fortunate to have worked with a brilliant team at LMP, and we have helped many overseas business establish their UK operations by providing them with hand-holding, straightforward and pragmatic immigration advice. Thank you, London Partners, for inviting us to be part of this session today.
Thank you, Rob. Delighted to have you on board with us today. So we're just going to kick off the first part of the session.
Sorry, there's just Gary as well.
Oh, Gary as well. Yeah, of course, Gary, introduce yourself, one of the Smiths.
Hi, yes, yeah, I'm Gary Smith of Smith Stone Walters. I'm one of the founders and directors of Smith Stone Walters. We've been established now for coming up to 20 years, dealing in all aspects of immigration and sort of changing landscape of immigration over those years, and helping clients sort of navigate sort of complex rules and trying to break those down into sort of easily understandable sort of set of guidelines for them. And as I say, we've been working with London Partners now for around 10 years, and very happy to do so.
Thank you. Yeah, Gary was telling us during the dry run that it used to be about a 50-page booklet for UK business immigration, but that's now turned into hundreds of pages, and they're constantly having to keep up to date with changes in UK immigration. So this is what this session is about, helping us to understand what immigration means to businesses and restructuring for recovery. So we're going to start off with the first part of the session with Kingston Smith. Steve is going to be talking about internationally mobile employees and flexibility, and he's got a short presentation before we go into a couple of questions. So Steve, would you like to kick off?
Yeah, thank you very much. I promise to keep it as short as I can because I think the restructuring piece is possibly of greater importance. But at the moment, because of the situation we're all living through, internationally mobile employees and flexibility is becoming of greater importance than it might ever have been. There's increased flexibility in working arrangements that's creating real practical concerns around compliance, tax, work permits, visas, permanent establishments, and staying on top of that is of paramount importance because of the speed of change. People need to develop a more compelling employee value proposition. So right now, all employees, particularly those who are moving internationally, are sensitive to what's going on, particularly being surrounded by all the uncertainty. And there needs to be a focus on the well-being of the international workforce. I think sometimes in the past, people have taken for granted that people could move internationally and settle. I think at the moment they need more support. There's a growth as a result of that in hybrid assignments, where you combine traditional and new elements that includes virtual working and shorter trips, which just requires greater focus on the policies that you have in place and anticipating how you might need to think flexibly, as well as and allowing employees to work flexibly. So in amongst all that, it's vital important that you have regular employee communication that takes into account things like cultural issues and language issues. And so there's a need to be on top of all tactical matters just now, such as the immigration procedures and the visa issues we'll hear about later, but also assignee tracking not just as where are they and what are they doing, but how are they and what can you do to support them. So that's what I wanted to emphasize as some of the key messages at the moment for internationally mobile employees.
I've got a couple of questions for you on internationally mobile employees and flexibility, and more focused on how does London help with employees needing to be more flexible?
Yeah, I think at the moment London's ideally placed because of, within London you've got the ease of transport to get around. Okay, we're working our way through some challenges right now, but I think we still are able to move around with all the care we need to to put in place. You've also got that London's accessible from a variety of districts surrounding it, which means that flexible working, remote working is easier than some other locations which are more isolated. So that whole infrastructure enables more flexibility to be possible. And it allows those hybrid arrangements to be more realistic when people want to have a mix of working from home, working in the office. So I think London's well placed for that.
Definitely, and I even find it myself that London has great connections into the city centre and the outer boroughs, and people who live in the outer boroughs are going to be more willing to work flexibly in the office and at home going forward. How can businesses look to overcome the challenges to their employees' physical and mental health?
Well, I think the thing here is that every prospective employer or people who have employees need to revisit their duty of care support. As I say, there's been a little bit of in the past, some of that's been based on less focus than it might have been, but now employees are dealing with isolation and trying to orientate themselves in difficult circumstances. You need to have a communication policy that, as I said earlier, includes language and cultural training, and have a policy that helps your employees make the most of London. Cinemas, theatres, museums, galleries, the open spaces are great for helping with people's physical and mental well-being, but don't leave them to discover it on themselves at the moment. Try and help them connect with the expat communities that are out there that can be a great support to your employees, but rather than leave them to it, make it part of your policy to help them do that.
Thank you. And how can companies be more prepared for further uncertainty around mobility? This is probably good for companies that have offices around the world or have an international employee base.
Yeah, I think develop a flexible mindset, really. Scenario plan, because there is a great deal of things that aren't absolutely certain at the moment surrounding a number of regulatory and legal issues. You can't be absolutely certain, so your plans and the advice you get needs to be updated regularly. So a scenario plan of the various situations you might be in, so that that you might need a variety of work arrangements, and those arrangements might need to change at short notice. You need to know how should you be supporting people if they're working remotely, and don't leave them isolated. Provide them the right tools and technology, which from a London point of view, you've got a great access to lots and lots of infrastructure. Make the most of that through making sure you consider the various situations that you're likely to be faced with. And ultimately, make sure you have in place for your business, when you come into London, a proper communication guidelines so that you can communicate and coordinate across border effectively when things are maybe a little bit more difficult at the moment.
Thank you. And one of the big questions is what people are still thinking about is Brexit, and is it a concern, and what should companies be considering in relation to Brexit?
First things they should be considering is right now, don't forget about Brexit. I think it's easy with everything else that's been in front of us to forget about it. From an internationally mobile employee piece, clearly we need to keep on touch of where the immigration issues go, not just in terms of people coming into the UK. If you want your people to move into Europe, then keep on top of it. Things are changing rapidly. The piece that I would particularly highlight for people is around the EU social security regs and healthcare arrangements. Those are not necessarily going to remain. If there's a hard Brexit, there's a good chance they won't. There are a number of negotiations going on with individual countries for reciprocal arrangements to ensure that there is some continuity of social security and healthcare treatment, but it may not be the case, in which case you would need to be sure you're aware of how that's going to impact in terms of who's entitled and who isn't entitled to access various forms of healthcare. There aren't any straightforward answers other than don't ignore it, keep an eye on it, and make sure that you have access to people who can keep you regularly up to date as these things evolve.
Thank you very much, Steve. That was great. And
thank you.
With everyone working remotely and with it is more of a consideration for businesses to sort of get a plan together on what their employees' physical and mental health is and how they engage with clients or employees working remotely. So we're now going to move on to the second part, business resilience and recovery with Dan, and we're going to kick off with some questions. These bullet points is just a very good overview of what we're speaking about, and we want to know, is the UK still a good place to do business at the moment? You're selling the UK here.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, look, there's no getting away from the fact it's tough out there for many businesses, and we can't sort of escape that fact. But it has been, from the businesses I've been speaking to, very sector dependent. So certain sectors such as tech and services are holding up better than others such as retail, where, you know, shops have been closed for quite a while, and travel, where there's obvious significant disruption. With the economy now reopening, hopefully things will start to improve. On a positive note, I think it's important to understand for people who aren't in the UK or are thinking of coming to the UK, that the UK has provided unprecedented levels of support to businesses, very generous loan arrangements, tax deferrals, extensive employee support measures, grants, relaxation of red tape, etc. And so the UK, as much as is possible, is in a good state and can be expected to start recovering and bouncing back, hopefully. And there's a lot of people hoping for a V-shaped recession rather than a more extended U-shaped recession, but only time will really tell. The other thing to think about for people thinking of coming to the UK, I guess, or people starting out here, is that, you know, there are opportunities coming out of this, such as it'll be easier to get talent in some sectors where there were pre-crisis shortages. So it's something, you know, to consider on that front as well.
Definitely, and especially with people being able to work more remotely, you don't have to specifically focus on London for talent now. You can still come to London and potentially hire people from outside London, but jobs for London is a good thing. But what is the most important thing businesses should be doing right now?
So, yeah, that's a good question. Lots of things, but I guess if I had to pick one thing, actively planning for the future. So being very proactive about your planning and diversifying if necessary, taking control, being agile, and dealing with issues head on. I mean, the worst thing for me is when a business owner comes to me and it's too late to do anything, where if they'd have spoken to me 3-6 months earlier, we would have been able to help. So yeah, being proactive.
What do you define as too late, when a company's too late?
So, I mean, there are those unfortunate situations where people come to us, you know, and they can't pay the payroll in a week's time. And there's very limited options at that point in time. And to be honest with you, a lot of businesses should have seen that coming for a decent period in advance of that. So, you know, when you think things are potentially looking dodgy in the next 3 to 6 months, then it's time to start talking and being proactive and getting to grips with it, rather than just hoping for things to improve. It's never too early to start talking.
Definitely. And we did have a company here that gave a situation that they had. So they've used the government schemes. They're confident that they've done everything to future-proof their business and to move forward. Is there anything else that you could point out that they should also be thinking about?
Okay, so there's lots of things they should be thinking about. I mean, first and foremost, the businesses that I've been dealing with that are doing the best are the ones that are communicating with their staff and stakeholders, engaging them with the business issues and what the business is doing to deal with them. So, as always, communication and leadership are key in a crisis. Secondly, you know, you have to be sure that you have availed yourself of all the government support schemes. So you may have done the job retention scheme. Have you deferred tax liabilities? Because the government are allowing you to do that for certain tax liabilities at the moment. Or if you're in real trouble, they can do bespoke agreements with you to give you some extra liquidity. Liquidity, on that note, is key. So actively managing your cash flows for the next, and having a view of your sort of rolling 13-week cash flow forecast is fundamentally important for anyone experiencing difficulty, so that they can manage those short-term peaks and troughs. Looking to the future, and sort of to echo some of the stuff Steve said, detailed scenario planning is key. So, you know, I'm recommending and working with lots of clients to map both sort of what a base case recovery might look like and also upside and downside scenarios, so that appropriate plans and actions can be put in place for each of them. And that's where I'm talking about being proactive before. You know, we're living in a time of large uncertainty, so having detailed scenario planning for each of those cases is very, very important. Obviously, fundamental things like zero-based budgeting and right-sizing, if businesses have got smaller, then addressing your cost base to deal with that is key. The other thing is not to forget is that your customers will all have been hit differently as well if you're doing a B2B type business. So if you're in B2B, then understanding your customers and their COVID impact so that you can focus to ensure that you're focusing your energies on the most appropriate opportunities is key to maximizing your recovery. Supply chains, I mean, again, another key risk area for many businesses at the moment. If your suppliers are currently having liquidity issues, you must have alternative suppliers ready to go in case they do have problems, otherwise your supply chain will be at risk. And I guess fundamentally, if your business is in difficulty, you must communicate with your stakeholders. So not just your employees, but also funders, investors, landlords, so that you can bring them with you on the journey so that they can support you for recovery rather than sort of hiding from them. Those would be my tips.
Thanks, Dan. A lot of tips there, and definitely want to share these slides with the participants after. And if they have any further questions, they can reach out to you directly. Just before we move on, could you tell us a little bit about the restructuring toolkit that you've got noted down there on the slide?
Yeah, so I mean, for people who aren't in the UK, obviously there is specific UK legislation dealing with how you have to deal with employees and the different insolvency options available for a company, such as company voluntary agreements, administrations, which actually are there to protect a company as a going concern and allow it to try and get some breathing space to find a solution if it's in trouble. So at MKS here, we have a wide variety of specialists across all areas, whether it be HR, insolvency, corporate finance, tax, to help people negotiate with HMRC, who are the tax overseer here. So we use all of those together with our corporate finance team to make sure that businesses get the right advice at the right time to hopefully see them through.
Thank you, that's great. So it's not just the online toolkit, it's a host of people within the organisation that can help with all aspects of it. So thank you very much, and just let you know everyone that Steve and Dan will be on the webinar for the next part of the session, and you can ask them any questions directly via the chat. So we're going to move on to Alex from our Research and Insights team, who will be giving us some analysis on people movement to and from the UK across the world and also within the UK. So this is great to give us a good picture of people movement, especially with the government's latest announcement on the flight paths last week.
Okay, thank you very much, Lisa, and I'd love to speak here, everyone. So yeah, first thing to say is you would have seen the announcement last week, but the UK's travel corridors have opened now. So on the 3rd of July, the UK government announced 59 countries with travel corridors, and these come into effect from the 10th of July. So what this means is travel from all of these nations is exempt from the 14-day quarantine requirement upon arrival in the UK that exists in all other countries across the world. This covers the majority of the European Union and Europe as a whole. Some European nations excluded from this, mainly including lists where there are higher than average levels of coronavirus cases, and actually also those without reciprocal agreements. It also includes some countries in Asia Pacific, including South Korea, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. And next slide, please, Karen. So another thing to look at, actually, there's been some trends going on over the last couple of months in terms of global airline capacity. So this is some data from OAG, and this shows the capacity of all airlines in each of the global regions coming in and out of airports within that region. So global airline capacity has actually shown a steady recovery throughout June. So if you can look at the graph on the right hand side, what this is index levels of change in capacity relative to kind of before coronavirus impact levels, so 20th of January. Europe actually had the biggest drop in airline capacity of actually minus 89% down the 4th of May. North America fell down to 77% below average, 69% in South Asia, and about half so in Northeast Asia. So Northeast Asia, China, South Korea, and Japan, and Southeast Asia, that includes India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. So as we've kind of moved through the last couple of months, Europe has gradually started to increase capacity. So actually, in terms of sheer growth, this is quite large growth levels. So Europe is now at minus 58 capacity of January levels in terms of flight capacity. So that's actually caught up with North America, whereas it was quite a few percentage points below in May. Southeast Asia and Northeast Asia are running about a third below flight capacity that they would usually. So kind of showing differences around the world. One thing that I'd say is this is a metric of capacity and not necessarily traffic. So it more shows the amount of flights, the amount of seats, more specifically, that are available for travellers. Next slide, please. So looking more locally at mobility within London, this is some data from actually Apple Maps. So they track the level of routing requests in locations by day, and they also do it by type of travel. So you've got car, public transport, and walking. So what I've done here is indexed it to pre-pandemic levels of early March. And as you can see, we had this really stark drop off in routing requests, which is a proxy for movement across different channels. So public transport fell the most, driving not quite as much, and then walking somewhere in the middle. And this has gradually moved back closer and closer to the normal levels we've seen, specifically in driving. We're now, latest data was actually taken from 4th of July. So, you know, the levels of people driving in London are around 8% lower than what they would have been before the coronavirus. Walking, this is about a third lower, so minus 33%, taking most recent data, and public transport around half the levels. One thing I should say as well is this is actually routing request data, so it's quite unlikely that commuters will actually be trying to find out what's the usual way they get to work. So these are probably looking at more out of the ordinary journeys. So it's kind of more a proxy that people that want to make journeys that they wouldn't usually make is those sort of journeys that would be included. And that's everything from me. If you have any questions on the data, please don't hesitate to get in touch.
Thank you very much, Alex. Very interesting. And I have noticed myself that there are a lot more cars on the roads than there were a couple of weeks ago. And possibly walking hasn't caught up because a lot of people don't walk to work, or from the, you know, like people don't make their normal walking journeys anymore. And hopefully that will pick up when people start to go back to the office. So we're going to move on to immigration with Rob. And we're going to be talking about UK immigration considerations and upcoming changes in policy. So Rob's got a couple of presentations and then a few questions in between presentations. And Rob, I'll let you kick off.
Thank you, Lisa. Hi, everyone. So during the next 20-25 minutes or so, we thought we'd like to go through some of the latest developments in the wonderful world of UK immigration. So here are the key topics for today. Updates relating to COVID-19, new changes on the sole representative route, key considerations for overseas business and that are at different stages of their UK journey, and finally the post-Brexit immigration bill. Can we have the next slide, please? Okay, so like most of us, the UK immigration operations have not been able to be immune to COVID-19. The lockdown has led to a significant drop in numbers of applications submitted and subsequently decisions made as well, for cases from both inside and outside the UK. As we can see here, we've used figures from April, for example. So the closures of the Home Office operations and global visa centres has also created a huge backlog as well. These are, however, gradually reopening, and as a result, approvals are steadily coming in. In response to these challenges, the UK government has been releasing COVID-19 immigration concessions in the form of guidance, not law, updated on a weekly basis, if not more frequent. As a result of this, we have seen some unprecedented flexibility, in fact, given to businesses and individuals affected by COVID-19. So, for example, applicants with a visa expiry date of before the 31st of July have been able to notify the Home Office and extend their leave to that date if they haven't been able to travel. Some individuals have also been able to switch their visa from within the UK, where they would need to submit their applications from their home country under normal circumstances. I think we're going to touch upon some further COVID concessions on the later slide as well, particularly those ones relevant to business and sponsors.
I've got a couple of questions here, Rob. One was from a client. They're planning on coming to the UK in the autumn.
Yep.
Should they delay their submission due to COVID, or because their anticipated travel date may be delayed?
So the visa applications typically is submitted online, and the closure of the biometric submission center should not really affect typically the applicant submission date. And typically we would say that in average we would need probably 2 to 3 months to prepare any visa application anyway. So our recommendation is to go ahead with the preparation of the application, and when you're ready, you should submit online and wait for the reopen of the biometric center. We are, as I said, gradually seeing these centers reopening. So hopefully by that point, when this client gets to that stage, the biometric center will have already reopened. We have also seen some very odd pattern in terms of the Home Office making decisions, and it seems to us they have not been able to make decisions on based on the sequence, the order of the application submitted. So really the best advice is to submit as soon as possible, and they could actually make a decision or at least start looking at documents even before the biometrics are submitted.
And where is the best place to get the most up-to-date concession guidance?
That's a good question. There is a wonderful link called on the gov.uk website. I'll read this out. I'm sure I have it somewhere. It's called COVID-19 Advice for UK Visa Applicants and Temporary UK Residents. So everyone should keep looking at this link, because it gets updated every other day almost. You can also use an email address to email Home Office if you have any questions. The email address is cih@homeoffice.gov.uk. There's also a telephone number you can use as well, 0800 678 1767. I should say though, the information on this link is not always up to date, accurate, and sometimes is open to sort of discussion or further investigation. So I would recommend individuals and business, when in doubt, seek professional help as well.
Thank you, Rob. We'll share those contact details and links in the follow-up after the session.
Great. Okay, so on this slide, we're talking about sole representative, and so the sole representative of overseas business is perhaps the most popular visa category for an overseas-based company during its initial expansion into the UK. It allows a business that does not have any UK operations to send one of its senior employees that can represent that parent company to come and to work in the UK by setting up a wholly owned subsidiary or branch. In principle, this application would need to answer three main questions. So number one, why would the company like to come to the UK? Number two, why this particular individual? And number three, if this individual would be able to meet specific technical immigration requirements, such as English language, such as suitability. The application process, in my words, is a storytelling exercise and has been relatively flexible in many aspects. And as a result of that, this category has been taken advantage by some applicants. So I think immigration practitioners like us have always known that it was just a matter of time for the name of the game to change. What we did not anticipate, however, was the Home Office has very conveniently and efficiently released a new statement of changes during the lockdown, in fact on the 14th of May, and that together with the subsequent caseworker guidance have confirmed the tightened criteria for this route, as we can see here on the slide, effective from the beginning of last month. So first, the rules have further clarified some of the existing criteria. For example, the overseas business must continue to operate once the UK operation is established, and that the principal place of business must remain outside the UK. The rep themselves must be a senior employee and cannot engage in their own business or represent any other UK business. So the second one is genuineness assessment. This is a secret killer, I would say, in the immigration, UK immigration rules, particularly over the last few years, and has in fact been a key contributor that has led to the death of the current points-based system. Now, unfortunately, this has now been introduced to the sole rep route. So questions will be asked during the consideration process if a genuine intention is behind the proposed UK setup, and whether the UK establishment is solely for the purpose of facilitating that visa process. The decision maker has also been given this huge power to request additional information or evidence if they believe it's necessary, and the applicant unfortunately may now be asked to attend an interview as well. They must be able to prove that they have the necessary attributes to do the job. They must not have the majority stake in the overseas business and must not own or control that business, which is obviously more difficult to evidence compared to the previous not majority shareholder requirement. And finally, the new changes also prevent the sole representative from bringing in a partner if that partner has majority share of or controls or owns that overseas business as well. Again, this is a significant change as we can see.
So Rob, we've just got a question that was submitted live, so I'll ask it. So from Wishtree Technologies, he's a partner and co-founder of an IT services company, and they have a 50% partnership in the company. Would they be eligible for the sole rep visa?
Unfortunately, 50% partnership would not, as we have discussed, be able to be eligible for the sole rep route. I would advise, I think sorry, I don't have the name of the individual, to contact us, and we can then look into all the other options for them as well. Sorry, Dilip, I can see here.
And then, sorry, just in the interest of time, we've got another question here and we might have to skip one of the presentations. But does the senior employee in sole rep situation need to have shares in the company on a compulsory basis?
The answer would be no. In fact, it's better that the senior employee does not have any share. However, if the situation is, say, for example, 10–20% share of the overseas business, that would definitely be possible as well. That would be acceptable as well.
Yeah, my recommendation here is, if you are applying for the sole rep visa, get professional advice, and Rob is very knowledgeable on the subject and would be on hand to help. So we're going to move on to the next presentation. It's on business considerations.
Yep, if we can have the next slide, please. Great. So on this slide, we have outlined some of the key options, as you can see, and considerations for businesses that are at different stages of their UK journey. For companies that are still planning to establish their UK operations, I think it's worth noting that apart from the sole representative route, there are other options, such as tier 1 investor, startup, innovator, and the new global talent route as well. Each would allow the individual to enter the UK and start a business. However, these are less popular routes because of their own unique requirements, such as financial threshold, such as sector focus, or prior visa endorsement. The EU settlement scheme is an option if the applicant holds an EU passport and plans to enter the UK before the end of this year. Second category for companies that have recently arrived in the UK. So typically once the sole rep has settled and started the UK operations for the business, there would be a need for a tier 2 sponsor license in order for the business to hire someone from within the UK, for example, from one of your competitors, or transfer their staff from overseas. Now, this is a compliance-driven application, and the principle behind it in Home Office eyes is with great power comes great responsibility, perhaps not as glamorous as the Spider-Man. As a business, if you wish to be able to sponsor individuals and issue work permit in order for them to be able to work in the UK, you must be able to demonstrate that you have a robust system in place to monitor, to report their immigration status, and also help the government prevent illegal employment. We have, however, seen some relaxation on the submission and compliance aspects of the Tier 2 license application due to COVID-19. So, for example, on reporting duties, on the right to work checks requirement. So because of how frequent these changes are released, we do again recommend businesses keep checking the latest guidance and seek professional advice where possible. Finally, with companies that have already established in the UK, assuming that you already hold a Tier 2 license, we have listed some of the latest COVID concession here. So extension and switch before the 31st of July, availability of biometric appointments. In fact, the possibility of not having to submit the biometrics again if you have done it within the last 5 years. And Tier 2 individuals permitted to start working as long as their course is assigned and applications submitted. Soft copy documents acceptable for the sponsor updates, and Tier 2 salary reduction, of course, as long as it's company-wide and temporary measure.
Thank you, Rob. That's very clearly laid out for all different stages of businesses that London Partners work with. So yeah, we'll definitely be sharing these slides with the participants after. So we've got time for one question on this, and we want to know, are there any other visa routes other than the sole representative and the EU settlement scheme for new businesses coming into the UK?
Yes, I mean, there are, as I said, for example, Tier 1 investor, the startup and innovator, as well as the latest little route in the family called global talent. However, there are restrictions, very clear restrictions, in fact, that the Home Office has laid out in the legislation. So we would need to look at individual circumstance usually and help the client tailor-make their plan into the UK, and what would be the best, what would be the most suitable route available to them.
Thank you, Rob. That was really informative. Unfortunately, we'll have to wrap up here in the interest of time, but Steve, Rob, Dan and Alex, that was really good insight and information on restructuring, people mobility and immigration policies, and thank you very much for that. We'll be copying on their contact details in the follow-up as well as the slides. So we're just going to wrap up with some polls to gather some feedback on the session. This helps us to find out if what we're doing right and what we need to improve for future sessions as we focus more on business recovery. So Karen, would you like to launch the polls?
Yeah, thank you. They're launched. So there are 4 questions, as Lisa mentioned. How likely are you to recommend London Partners sessions to business partners, to another business? Scroll down though, because there are 4 questions. And then it's how helpful did you find this session today? And how engaging and interactive did you find the format of the session? And what business support areas are you most interested in? I can see that you're all filling it in, so I'm going to give you a bit of time.
The 4th question at the end is quite important to us because we want to make sure that the webinars are relevant and that people engage in the webinars that we're organising and inviting partners to participate in.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to end it now in 4, 3, 2, 1.
Thank you, Karen. So we do have future webinars coming up every 2 weeks. Our next one is on the 22nd of July with accessing alternative banking solutions and developing your business in 2020. So that's all about alternative banking solutions and business development, 2 massive topics that our clients are very interested in. And I'd like to thank all of our partners for attending today. It was a pleasure to have you all on board. Steve, Dan, Rob, thank you very much for your time and expertise. I'd also like to thank all of our participants for listening in and asking and submitting questions. The session is recorded, so in the follow-up there will be a link to the recording. So this is the London's Global Good Newsroom. It's London Partners WhatsApp group, and it's a very, very cool WhatsApp group. You get up-to-date, timely information on good news stories happening in London. So all you have to do is add this number to your contact and WhatsApp your name, job title, organization, and you'll be added to the group. It's a little bit like a little good news feed that pops good stories into your WhatsApp group every 2 to 3 times a week. I recommend it. Then these are all of our contact details. We've got ourselves here at London Partners. If you are thinking about signing up and growing in London, Smithstone Walters for immigration, Kingston Smith for restructuring advice and global mobility, and with Steve and Dan. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for participating and hope to see you soon in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.